Welcome to Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark, the professional webinar series that offers clinical and personal perspectives on issues that are common, but often not talked about. Here is today's Collegial Conversation.
Hi, and welcome to a Collegial Conversation. I'm Diana Clark, and I am really happy to introduce you to Patricia Sung, who is a specialist in ADHD and has a practice that supports mothers primarily who struggle with that disorder. So, welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you describe a little bit about the current definition of ADHD and the subtypes, and just educate us just an inch about this so I don't sound so ignorant when I ask questions?
I'll try to do the nutshell version. So ADHD is considered a medical disorder by many, but by some not so much. And it is a different way of functioning. You have a brain that functions differently than most people. So the prevalence is somewhere between 5 and 10%. I think it's actually closer to 10, maybe even 15, because there's so many people who have gone undiagnosed that we don't know about. But we just function in a different way. So it shows up in the obvious ways where people think of like, oh, that 5-year-old boy who's just bouncing off the walls and doesn't listen and driving everybody bonkers. But when you think about how it presents in adults, when you're looking at like the inattentive type, so like that 5-year-old boy is more representing the like clear hyperactive version,
Right.
But you can have inattentive or you can have a combination of the two. For those of us with inattentive, I'm one of them, our hyperactivity happens in our brains. So we're constantly thinking about things. We're great catastrophizers where we worry about all the what ifs that happen, and our brain hops from one idea to the next, and it affects every part of our lives. It's not just a schoolwork issue. It is an emotional regulation issue. So an issue of like, how do we keep track of our emotions and keep them within the boundaries that make us feel comfortable? A lot of us are emotional sponges and we take on whatever's going on around us. You see it in the impulsive decisions of everything from like finances to like, man, why can't I stick with my budget? Or, losing things like, I swear I just had my keys in my hand. Where did they go? And the hard part about ADHD is a lot of the things that happen are things that happen to everybody. Like we've all set our keys down and can't find them. But when it's happening to you 40 times a day and you can't find the thing you set down, or you lost that thought again, and when it becomes an impairment on your general day and it's really affecting your mood and your ability to get things done, your ability to hold down a job, and it starts filtering into all these other pieces of our lives, that's where it's not considered a normal, oh yeah, everyone sets their keys down kind of a thing. So you have these two types, hyperactive and inattentive, and then the combo of the two. And it's something that's been prevalent through your whole life. So you'll see the signs of it from childhood all the way through adulthood, but it presents very differently as you age, because as you mature and as you grow, you learn a lot of skills to get by. And so one of the best questions I like to ask people is, if we took away your system, if we took away your procedure of doing that,
right,
your workaround, how would it go then? And then it's like, oh, no, do not do that to me. Then you know that there's more going on behind the scenes. So that is my very short answer.
So you use the word we when you were describing ADHD. Yes. So I'm assuming you're in that camp.
Yes.
When did you get clarity around that for yourself? And do you see the signs going all the way back?
Oh, for sure. So I was actually diagnosed my freshman year of college. I was 18 years old. And it was because I went from being an excellent student. I was on National Honor Society. I was on scholarship at Tulane, which is a great university, and academic scholarship. And I showed up to college and fell apart, because all of a sudden I was responsible for keeping up with everything. Whereas in high school, I showed up in the morning, I followed the plan all day long, go to first period, second period, third period. And a lot of it was predetermined for me. And there was a lot of structure there. But when I got to college, there wasn't structure there. Sometimes you have class at 8 a.m. Sometimes you don't have class until 3 p.m. And a lot of that structure that I didn't realize was helping me so much was gone. And that's when I got diagnosed, because I almost failed out of school. I almost lost my scholarship. I was on academic probation, going like, oh my goodness, like something's wrong with me. Like what is going on here? And thankfully the doctor at the student health center was familiar with it, which is very lucky, because this was the year 2000 and there just wasn't that, like, the level of awareness and knowledge that we have now. So I'm very thankful that I happened to be in front of the right doctor who knew how to help. But I mean, I can look back in my childhood and see, like, the smarter you are and the more quick-witted you are, the better you can mask things and the better you come up with ways to take care of yourself. So that's why a lot of people who are very successful don't realize that they have it until such a late age, because they figured out how to make it work until then. But it's things like, when I look at my, like, you can go back to my report cards, even in kindergarten, for me, emotional regulation is a really big one. And like, my kindergarten teacher wrote that I was crying in kindergarten because things weren't going my way. And I was sad that, like, I would make a mistake and I would cry about, like, I erased it 17 times and now there's a hole in my paper. Like, those kind of emotional things that would really eat at me as a little kid. That's where you can see more of mine. And like, I have no sense of time. So like, I always say, if you stuck me in a room and came back a little while later and said, hey, Patricia, how long were you here? I would have absolutely no clue if I was there for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour. It depends on, like, was I doing something fun? Was it enjoyable? It probably seemed really short. If I'm just staring at the wall, that was torture. And I feel like I've been here forever and it was only 3 minutes. So those little signs that are not as obvious, where when it's not annoying everybody because you're bouncing off the walls and you're not really struggling in an academic subject, it's easy to get missed along the way. But when you really understand what ADHD looks like and how it presents in inattentive, or in the different genders, or in all the different ways that it can show up, you realize, like, wow, this is all encompassing. And there are just so many adults that aren't aware that this is why life feels really hard right now.
Hard for them. So I'm wondering, you talk about emotional regulation skills. I wonder how many, particularly women, get misdiagnosed with something like borderline or some other personality, mood disorders, whatever, when in fact the issue was ADHD. Is that common?
It's so common. And it is, generally speaking, it's these other things that show up that are what get us to the doctor in the first place. And so there is a lot of misdiagnosis going on. But generally speaking, ADHD does come, I call them friends. They're maybe more like frenemies. I don't know. The technical word is comorbidities, where a lot of other disorders come along with ADHD. So you'll always see that it has a friend. I mean, I don't think I know anyone yet. I don't think I've met anyone yet that only has ADHD.
I know, come along with that.
Right. It's like there's anxiety and depression and, the bipolar, there is all the learning disabilities. Like, you can go on and on, chronic illness, autoimmune issues, like autism. There's so many different things that come along with ADHD, but there is a huge issue of people being diagnosed with either the wrong thing or only some of the things. And so, not to say that if you've been diagnosed with anxiety that you don't have anxiety, but it could be that your anxiety is because you have ADHD. So when you're treating your ADHD, and I think of it like a tree, if you're treating the roots of the tree, you're going to have a really healthy tree. So all of the problems that you're experiencing with the anxiety or the depression or the eating disorder or whatever, all of those get easier. Like, not to say that they don't go away, but it's easier to treat those things when we're dealing with the root issue of the ADHD.
That makes sense. So how does this play out for moms in particular?
So for moms, the hardest part is that first, like, I mean, motherhood's hard already. And it's already a huge responsibility. You're already juggling so many people. Like, if you think about, you have possibly a partner, each kid has their own things, their own activities, their own doctor's appointments. And all of a sudden you've gone from taking care of yourself to taking care of however many more people, plus all of the interrelational, like all the relationships in between all those people too. And it's not just the weight of motherhood, but then on top of it, it's how ADHD affects each of those layers. So if you're struggling with your finances and now you also have to pay for your kid's soccer uniform that you forgot was due, and now you're like, great, like, how am I going to come up with this money? Or you see it in like, oh my goodness, it's already 5:30. We should have started eating 10 minutes ago, and I haven't even thought of a dinner plan yet. Or, all of the extra things that come with your kids when they have extra needs. So generally speaking, if you have ADHD, your kid also is significantly more likely to have ADHD. It's actually,
There is a genetic predisposition.
it is. And it's, whereas the general population, we're talking about 5-10%, maybe 15 in my personal opinion. When you have ADHD, your kid has a 50 to 70% chance of having ADHD. So it goes way up. And that means that your kid also needs a lot of support. And here mom's going, I can't take care of myself. And now you want me to take care of another person who also is struggling to take care of themselves. And so you go from doing like the basics of mothering and the basics of taking care of yourself. And all of a sudden it's exponentially more difficult because of all of these executive function challenges that come in. So what I love working about moms is that, to me, when I start with a mom, I'm starting with the center of the household, who's caring for everyone, the person who's driving like the attitude and the environment of the home. So when I help a mom, I am therefore also helping their partner. I'm helping their kids. And honestly, like probably their friends, because we tend to flock together. So, probably a good number of your friends also have it. Your extended family. Like I always tell people, if someone in your family got diagnosed, test everyone who's blood related. Everybody who's blood related should get screened, because there's a good chance. And a lot of us, when we've grown up in a house full of ADHD, we don't know that what we're experiencing is different or hard because everyone around us is also like that. And we don't know that what we're experiencing is out of the norm.
That's great. So I know you have a podcast. What is the name of it and what is the goal of it?
So it's called Motherhood in ADHD, and I actually started as a hobby. I think I'm like 4.5, almost 5 years ago now. And the whole point was to help moms who have ADHD. When I first had my boys, I couldn't find much of anything on the internet. I mean, I was Googling all kinds of stuff at 3 a.m. while up breastfeeding. Like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. This is too much. And I only found like an article on Scary Mommy, and that lady was mostly just venting. Like, there wasn't any solutions out there at the time. And granted, my oldest is now almost 9, but I just wanted to help moms get like the support and help that they need and get quality information out there, because there are so many people who are out there telling incorrect information and pretending like it's correct. People who are just out there to make a buck, people who are trying to convince you that if you take their supplement, you're going to cure all your problems. And that is like just one of my giant pet peeves is that people will capitalize against, on top of other people's problems. So I want to make sure that people have a great way to get quality information, to find the support that they need, and know that there's a community of people out here who are like you. It's not you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. And that when you find the solutions that make sense to you and you set up your life to fit how your brain functions, you can be extremely successful. Like, you can see how many famous people with ADHD there are because they figured out how to make it work for them. Right. So when you have the system that works for you, and when you have the support that, probably in a family full of ADHDers you didn't get, then you can start to be extremely successful. And I want moms to know that there's hope out there.
I like that. Is there anything I failed to ask you today, Patricia, before we close up?
Ooh. No, I think I would just emphasize, I just want moms to know that they're not alone, that there are literally millions of us out here struggling with the same things. And when you find your people and you know that you're part of a community and that you can find the support you need, not just by, people like me who are experts, but other moms in the community who are like, yeah, I've dealt with that. Here's what's worked for me. And you feel at home and seen and heard, there's so much more hope that, obviously it doesn't change your situation, but it makes it a lot easier to deal with when you know that there's people out there. And please reach out. I would love to help people. I have a free Facebook community. We've got the podcast. I have a ton of free resources on my website. I want moms to know that there is hope out there. And
not just hope, that there is a place where they won't feel judged and shamed. I would imagine that there are, there is a bit of competitive mothering in our culture, and I would imagine that there is a little bit of shaming going on for
Oh, so
mothers
much.
who think differently. So,
Yes. Yeah. And when we can start to let go of that guilt and shame and say, hey, this is hard, and have other people say, yeah, it's hard, then we can even unlayer all that shame some more and really get to instead of putting our effort towards telling ourselves how much we suck, we can actually make a difference and make things better.
yay. Well, thank you again for joining me today, Patricia. For you watchers and listeners, please check out Patricia's podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this webinar. Tune in to more webinars and sign up for our newsletter at o'connorpg.com.